Hello and welcome back. It's springtime and we are back with a new episode for Search of the Record, a podcast coming to you from the Google Search team where we talk about search and maybe have some fun along the way as well. My name's Martin and I am developer? No, not a developer. Search relations engineer, I think is the official title. Someone excited about, so I don't know. But I'm not alone in my confusion, I guess. With me today is Gary. Hi, Gary.
Maybe you're a unicorn.
No, I'm not sure.
That could be your title.
You're a house elf, right?
Yeah, I had many titles. I remember
many titles.
maybe 10 years ago, because I'm such a cheerful person, Miley Oye, who was working with us back then, she gave me a title, Chief of Sunshine and Happiness.
Oh.
And I was very happy about that because it's super ironic.
No, that's very
cynical,
accurate.
I guess.
No, it's very accurate. You're such a joy.
Martin, stop lying live. Oh, wait, this is not live. Go on.
It's off the record. We can say whatever. Oh, God.
Anyway, so that was my given title. And then the house elf, I don't know where that came from. I think it was someone asked me what my title is, like someone external. And then I was just like fumbling like you did with like whatever our title is and we don't know. And then I was just like, you know what, house elf. And then it just stuck.
I think I gave myself, internally we had this tool where you can look up people working at Google. I think my title that I gave myself there is Open Web Cheerleader. So that's a fun one. By the way, Open Web.
Oh, yeah.
Remember Steve?
I thought that was cool. What?
Remember Steve? Our search engine?
The
best.
My butler.
What? No, the search engine that we built. You know, the toy search engine that we built and haven't been speaking about for a while now.
Oh my God, that was like 20 years ago.
Yeah, it feels like it, but it's, I was wondering, like, Steve had a cool feature that I think other people should use more. Can we make that into like an internet standard? It's already a meme, I believe, but we could make it a standard, no? Should we do that?
What?
You've been at a standards meeting
What?
recently. I know that you've done that. And I know that you have worked with someone to make robots.txt a standard. Wouldn't it be cool if we made more web standards? Like more... Well, I'm not even sure if it's a web standard. Is it a web standard? Is robots.txt a web standard? I don't know. I'm confused.
So I think we have to go back to what a standard is first. And then we can qualify them with internet standard or web standard or whatever.
Oh, okay.
But I think it largely depends on under what organization you are standardizing something. I work with the IETF, the Internet Engineering Task Force. Within that, a couple working groups, namely AI Pref and most recently the TLS, like what does that then stand for? Transport Layer Security Working Group.
Oh, okay. All right.
And yeah, let's like if you want to go and explore this, then we should probably look up what a standard is, right?
Okay, so I think a standard is kind of like an agreement amongst a bunch of players in a certain field. Let's say like HTML is a standard because a bunch of groups have agreed that HTML has certain elements and is built in a certain way, and what are the things that it has and hasn't. And I think for HTML, it used to be the W3C, the World Wide Web Consortium, but has has a couple of years back moved to a living standard under the Watt WG. Yeah. So I think like a bunch of people come together, form like a forum or a group where they agree on certain things to be true or to be part of
Yeah.
something, I guess. I don't know.
So
How would you
in my
define it?
head, it's uh, typically a document,
Mm-hmm.
and drafted by consensus. So basically, someone proposes something to a group, and then the group agrees that it's a good idea and we should continue with it. And that's the approval state. And typically, it has to be under some sort of institution
Mm-hmm.
or consortium or something, like some governing entity, I suppose. So yeah, basically what you said, but using fancier words. And we have quite a few such entities slash consortiums that govern standards that we are using on the internet. Namely, like the thing that I'm working with is the IETF, but there's also the W3C, for example, that creates standards. And I think that they typically agree upon what they are governing. So, for example, the IETF is governing, well, internet-related stuff that is lower in the stack, in the internet stack. So, for example, transfer protocols like QUIC or TCP/IP or those kind of stuff, HTTP itself, and then I could be completely wrong, but because I haven't worked with them, but W3C is more related to the markup, perhaps.
Yeah.
That is
Markup
used on the
related
internet.
things.
And then we have JavaScript that I don't even know where it falls. But that could be like a completely different consortium because, for example, C has its own thing, like its own entity and own governing body. So I would imagine that JavaScript could have the same thing.
It has the TC39, the Technical Committee 39, but I'm not sure which organization that is under because it's clearly part of a bigger thing. But I'll figure that one out.
Eventually.
Right.
So what are we standardizing?
So I thought like we had a pretty cool thing where the Steve could be told what cool things you have on your website by basically having like a cool.txt. So that's not really markup. It's like robots.txt, but better.
What?
It's clearly better.
Nothing is better than robots.txt, Martin.
No?
So it sounds like a sitemap.
Oh, so maybe we already have that. Yeah. Huh. Where does the sitemap standard live?
I mean, we could try to standardize sitemap.
Isn't it standardized?
It doesn't. Stepping back, like robots.txt was de facto standard for what, like 20 years or something, or 25 years, something like that. And then eventually we standardized it under the IETF. Why the IETF? Because that's what I was familiar with. Like no particular reason. I'm a nerd, and I read RFCs, requests for comments, and basically internet standards to understand like how the internet works and what are the new things that happen on the internet, like new protocols that we can use for stuff. So basically, we just went with the IETF.
Okay.
So similarly, sitemap, which was created, the standard was created, well, de facto standard was created around year 2005, 2006, or it was announced in 2006, but was created in 2005, something like that. That is a de facto standard, meaning that there no governing body that adopted it and pushed for it being an actual standard.
Okay. But it's the de facto standard because everyone kind of agreed that we are going to do it like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So basically, it's so widely adopted in its original form that basically it became a de facto standard. I don't know what a better word is for de facto, but it's basically something that people just adopted.
Oh,
Like writing is not a standard, but what?
It's an informal standard because once you have a document and like a larger organization adopts it, it's a formal standard.
Yeah, perfect. Informal standard. Then we don't use Latin anymore. Informal. Fine. If I had to guess where we would go with, or if we wanted to standardize it, then I would guess whoever governs RSS and Atom and those things, because technically it's doing the same thing as those formats, basically giving you a list of URLs plus optionally some extra metadata. And probably that's why we are also using, Google search is also using RSS and Atom as discovery sources.
Confusingly enough, they have RSS Advisory Board. The RSS Advisory Board owns RSS, and that's a separate standards body, apparently. Wow. Who owns XML? I think XML is...
What did you search for? Atom XML?
I searched for RSS, and RSS is owned by the RSS Advisory Board. Huh.
Atom as well?
Atom, I don't know. Let me see.
Actually, Atom is IETF. How about that?
Oh. And I found out who owns JavaScript, and I feel very, very dumb.
Okay. Anyway, so we should start. We should stop Googling, I guess.
Yeah.
And good podcasting, like what both of us just.
I think these guys. This is the real vibe of this podcast. Really, figuring things out as we go along. JavaScript, called ECMAScript, it's owned by the ECMA, the European Computer Manufacturers Association, which is very confusing to me. Why does the European Computer Manufacturers Association...
I didn't even know that we have computer manufacturers in Europe. But anyway. We
used to, at least.
So, okay, so this is kind of weird. So basically Atom is owned by IETF. Well, developed by IETF. And RSS is not. Which means we can actually choose whatever we want. Like if we wanted to standardize sitemaps, then technically we could go with the IETF, or try to go with the IETF, and see if they would want to adopt it. And that's because they already have something that is similar to sitemaps.
Okay.
So it kind of fits in the big picture.
And is that how you would choose a standards body? Because if you want to make something a standard, you have lots of bodies to choose from: the RSS Advisory Board, the IETF, the IEEE, probably the ECMA, apparently, the W3C, the WWG. What does it mean? Why should I go with one body over the other?
So you would probably go with one body or the other because it fits their purpose better. Okay. So, for example, with I guess sitemap XML is not that great because there you can choose like multiple stuff or multiple bodies. But if you say you wanted to create a new or a replacement for TCP, then there's only one place for it where you would do that, where you would develop it, and that's the IETF. And that's because, as the way I understand it, is that the people who would know enough about previous standards, related standards, are there. So basically, you have a community that is expert on the topic, and then it's more likely that you are going to end up with something that is actually usable on the internet, because the discussions will lead to a better standard.
Okay. So whoever is best positioned to help you make the right decisions in the standard and get it adopted as widely as possible, that's where you should take it. Okay, got it.
Yeah, that's the way I understand it.
Makes sense.
Which might be completely off, but in my brain it makes sense.
That does make sense, yeah.
And then once you picked a standards buddy, then what?
Yeah, that's a good question.
In case of IETF, there's I think there are two ways. Well, actually, three ways, I guess. So at IETF, you can publish something like an informational RFC, which doesn't become like a standard. It's basically an opinion piece, if you like. And pretty much anyone can publish that, I think. And there's minimal scrutiny with approving them. And then you have, if you want to actually go for a standards track document or end result, then you have two options. One is finding a working group within the IETF that would adopt or babysit your draft that you are writing, meaning that you find the group that has the most expertise for the stuff that you are writing. So if you are, I don't know, when we were developing Quick, QUIC, which is like a kind of a replacement for TCP/IP, not quite, like, but now with HTTP 3, it's actually getting used quite a bit. You would look for the working group that developed TCP/IP, which is a very low number standard, probably not one, but somewhere there, because it is the very basic building block of the internet. And then you would go to that working group and you would ask them, hey, what do you think about this new idea that I have? Here's a draft that I wrote up. Would you see this as a good fit for your working group? And then if they say yes, then you knock yourself out and start developing further with input from the working group. They will raise lots of concerns. They will have very good feedback about pretty much every letter in your draft. And then eventually, after probably years of iteration, you end up with something that you can get consensus on, meaning that everyone agrees that this is a good standard proposal and it should become a standard.
Okay.
So if you can't find a working group, or you don't know about working groups in general at IETF, then they have a dispatch list, and you can email that dispatch with your idea, including a link to your draft, and then people will start arguing about which working group should this belong to, or whether it should be independent track.
That sounds interesting, but it sounds pretty low barrier. How many people are doing that, just like emailing their ideas? Is that happening often?
I don't know. I don't follow the dispatch list. I'm following HTTP, TLS, and AI Pref. But I would imagine not so many. And I think there's a good reason for that, and that is that technically the internet is in pretty good shape when it comes to the technologies that make the internet happen. So there's not that much need for new stuff and replacement stuff, and yeah, it just doesn't happen. And then when there is something new, then people would directly go to the respective working groups instead of dispatching their draft, because whether we like it or not, the community that develops the internet is pretty tight, so they kind of know where to go when they have a new idea. It's not like Gary woke up one day and, hey, I want a new AI nonsense.txt, and I will make it happen on my own. They just know where to go.
So you go there, you find a working group, you build your request for comments thing, and then you get like lots of feedback. And at which point is it that this becomes a standard?
Oh, well, it probably takes years for something to become a standard. And when I say probably, I'm underselling it. So basically, it just takes years for something to become a standard. There's a good reason for that. Basically, standards shouldn't be issued lightly, because they are going to govern something. There's lots of things to pay attention to when you are developing, especially internet standards, because there are, for example, bad actors on the internet who are going to try to exploit the stuff that you are developing. Let's say that, I don't know, robots.txt. There's a risk that someone could create a buffer overflow in our parsers, for example, and then exploit that to their advantage somehow. Like it cannot happen because it happens in isolation, but or the parsing is done in isolation. But let's say that if we hadn't put a 500 kilobyte limit on robots.txt file, then people would be able to cause a buffer overflow, like try 4 gig to like a 4 gig file, 4 gigabyte file, to see if that would cause damage to the parser, namely a buffer overflow, or try with 64 gigs or whatever. And then once you have that buffer overflow, then you have access to memory blocks that you could exploit to your advantage. And these are things that when we are developing the standards, we pay attention to. So basically, when I'm reading a draft, then I would look at how I would exploit stuff that the standard is describing, and then make recommendations to the draft or to the authors saying that, hey, I think like this particular bit could be exploited. How about you add a 500 kilobyte limit to the parsing limit? Because then basically you are like the the plan of the attackers or potential attackers is foiled from the beginning. It's like with 500 kilobytes, you're not going to exhaust memory.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you do, then you have a different problem. To me, often it feels like people are nitpicking on stuff, but they are nitpicking for a very good reason. And that is that these standards have to work everywhere for a long time without fault, or as little fault as possible.
Yeah.
They are going to nitpick every single little thing in the draft and make recommendations about how to improve it. And that can also go like really weird, because sometimes it's nitpicking about the language that's used in the draft.
Oh, okay.
So for example, you haven't explained clearly enough how parsing should be done when there's an empty line between two rules, for example, in robots.txt. And then you would go back and refine your draft and add more words to a sentence to better explain that kind of stuff. I think in our case, we were very lucky because we had our tech writer with us. And Lizzie is really good at noticing deficiencies in the language that we are using. Like when you or I write something, on first read, when we spit out our drafts, on first read, it's like the England is very weird sometimes.
Because England know our first language, yeah.
Yeah, and then Lizzie would come in and she would clean it up and ask questions about like, this is what you meant or this is what you meant, because depending on where you put, I don't know, the comma might mean different things. So yeah, that's one thing. And the other thing is that, especially in IETF standards, we use certain keywords that have weight, and that would be stuff like should or may or must. And in like if you're reading RFCs, those are capitalized, and that's because those are special meaning keywords. Well, not special meaning, but they have special weight in the documentation. And when you're not documentation, in the standard, and when you're reading it as an implementer, then you have to understand that if something says must, then you actually have to do it. So let's say that in case of robots.txt, you have rows, and then the rows contain a key value pair, right? And then in the draft, it would say that the key must be separated from the value using a colon. And then when you are writing your parser, then you know that there's no wiggle room there. It has to be a colon that is the separator. But then, like for example, with a parsing limit, like we do want to allow some wiggle room. Like for example, if you know that you are absolutely certain that you cannot get a buffer overflow from too large robots.txt or very large robots.txt files, then you could say that we impose or parsers should parse the first 500,000 kibibytes of robots.txt. And then you know that, okay, it's not a hard limit. It's basically like a lower limit of how much I have to parse. And then if I want to parse 700 gigs worth of robots.txt file, I can do it. Like there's no the standards limit set to that, like hard limits. Nice. So yeah, those keywords mean a lot.
Okay, cool.
I don't actually know where I was going with this.
It takes a long time for a standard to get made because they have to be long-lived. And eventually, all these comments are addressed and everyone in the working group is happy with it. So does it automatically become a standard? Okay.
So you can push back on comments. Like it's, hey, I took your comment in consideration. Here are my reasons for using the current language or the current structure or whatever. And I think your comment should not be applied to my draft. And then you can go back and forth and convince the other person to basically accept whatever you already have. Or you address the comment, and then basically implement the change that you were asked to implement. And then once there are no more comments from the working group, then there's something called a last call, meaning that, and I actually monitor that list most rigorously, I guess. Basically, the working group believes that, or the shepherd of the document believes that all comments were addressed and there haven't been new comments for a while. So if you have something to say it now or be silent
forever.
Because we are going ahead with standardizing this. Another interesting thing that there's a bunch of different directorates in the IETF that will need to review a document or a draft during the last call. So, for example, the structure of the RFC actually matters, or the draft matters, because it may be used to, or the drafts may be parsed by machines, and then it needs to follow like some very specific structure, or even just the publishing engine that they are using that will need to be able to parse it. References, for example, it matters where you put them. It matters what kind of reference you are using. There's informative, where you are just like informing that, hey, this, I don't know, like from robots.txt, we reference sitemap XML as an informative reference. But then there's also normative references. So, for example, when we are talking about HTTP headers, we call in a normative reference to the HTTP standard, like 9110, because we make claims about how something should be parsed, for example, in the HTTP header, or how something should be interpreted in the HTTP header. And then a normative reference, basically a link to the doc that defines some behavior, let's say. And then someone extremely familiar with the topic that you're discussing in your draft is going to be asked to review your draft to see that no one actually missed anything that can be missed. So basically, you get like a final review. And then once everyone is happy with, like every directorate is happy with your draft, and there is no more last call comments, then it can be moved forward with standardization. And then there's at least two kinds of standards that I can think of at IETF at least. And one is proposed standard, which basically it is a standard, but it's not immutable. Meaning that technically it could be changed, or that's how I interpret it. And then there's actual standards like internet standards, like STD1, standard 1, which defines a immutable standard that the internet uses.
Okay.
Like you can add extensions to TCP, but technically it's immutable. Like the way it is right now, that's how it has to die.
I think that's reasonable. Then you can at least rely on that. And if you can still extend it without changing the underlying fundamental standard, I think that's fair.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. There might be limitations, but hey, but that's it. Okay, so then everyone agrees, or you have explained why something got excluded, and then it becomes a standard by basically being reviewed a final time by the directorates, and then there's a last call period, and then we have a standard. Ta-da! Okay, that's pretty cool. You said that takes years.
Yeah.
Is that because the consensus takes so long, or do you need to have like a reference implementation or something, or how does that how come that it takes so long?
I think both. I think it's both. So you have to show that the thing that you are working on actually works. And for that, usually when we are in the TLS working group, you would have adoption calls for new drafts if they don't have someone to work with already. Like, let's say that Martin came up with this new brilliant idea and needs someone to implement it as a test to show that it actually works. Like, have a proof of concept, I guess. Like, you need to show that it works. And then the other thing is that, like, there's, especially with certain drafts, there's lots of back and forth on the mailing list about particular sections of something, or even like the general topic that you are discussing in your draft. And then argument is not the right, like, basically it's just like civil and constructive discussion about the draft or sections of the draft or multiple sections of the draft. And you know, the internet, like, people have opinions about stuff, and then you have to decide whether you address the comments, and then you are able to move forward with your draft, or take a step back and maybe revise that whole paragraph or the whole draft to exclude the part that people are upset about or nitpicking on. So basically, there's tons of iteration going on, and it makes the process very slow. But for a good reason. Like, as we said, that like these standards actually are used by sometimes the whole internet. Like in case of TCP, for example, like the whole internet is using it. So it has to be ironclad. There's no wiggle room on there.
Yeah, I mean, there's the saying, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go as a group. And I think this is one of the examples where going slower improves the quality and longevity of the outcome. And all of this is public, right? It's not happening behind closed doors. Okay.
No, everything is public. And also our meetings are public. So technically anyone can join in and listen to what we are talking about, or even just say words in the meeting. Like, there's no formal membership. You can just show up and contribute to standards.
That's really cool.
I don't know how it works with other standards bodies, but at least with IETF, you can just show up and say what you have to say in our meetings. For formal meetings, there's usually an entrance fee, but otherwise, you can just show up.
Yeah.
Literally.
I mean, the fee is probably to cover the cost of the location and all the logistics of making it happen. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
I mean, like the last IETF meeting I went to, that was in Bangkok. It was a week long, including the hackathon, and we were using 3 floors of the hotel. Like, literally all the meeting rooms that the hotel had available. So like it must cost an enormous amount of money.
Yeah.
So they have to cover it somehow because they don't have a profit.
And as far as I know, that's pretty much the case for most of the standards bodies, because I know that for W3C, it's very easy to set up an account. It's free. You can start your own working group and then do your thing. And then eventually you come out with something that looks like a proposal, and then other people are being invited to comment on it. And then that whole process happens, but it's all public as well. I'm pretty sure the TC39, which governs JavaScript or ECMAScript, is doing more or less the same thing. And I'm pretty sure that WhatWG does so as well. And I think they are even on GitHub, if I'm not mistaken. So all pretty transparent processes, which is pretty cool, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that was interesting. So that's how a standard is made. That's how the sausage is made from the inside. Wow. So, okay, if we had a bunch of years and enough motivation, we could make, for instance, sitemaps a standard. That's interesting.
We could. There's also like, probably you have to sit down and figure out whether it's worth it, because it's not really like, it's a simple XML file. So and there's not that much that can go wrong with it. So it's like, I was thinking about submitting a proposal about for standardizing it, but then I was thinking like, but why? Like, what's the benefit? Because with robots.txt there was benefit, because we knew that different parsers tend to parse robots.txt files differently, and then if you have a standard, then at least you fix that potentially. With sitemap, it's like,
Yeah,
like,
fair.
If it's not a standard, then what?
Okay, so you have to weigh the benefits. And as you said, like, one of the benefits is that you can kind of make things more reliable across different products from different vendors, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, with those de facto or informational standards, yes.
So what are the benefits? So why would you do it? Why? What did you get out of it?
With robots.txt, it's that we know for certain that now we are in a better place when it comes to parsing robots.txt file than we were 10 years ago. It also allowed us to open source our robots.txt parser, and then people start building on it, which also helps with creating better robots.txt files, I would imagine. And like having robots.txt is, at least to me, but I think also for pretty much every search engine, is a super important thing. And then if we can agree on how robots.txt files should be parsed, then there's less strain on site owners.
Fair.
Like trying to figure out like how to write the damn files. So it works for everyone.
I see.
Like every consumer of robots.txt files. And to me, that's nice for the community and nice for the internet itself.
Okay, that makes sense. That was really cool. Thank you so much for taking me on this journey of how the web standards, internet standards, and all that are made. I've never been part of that kind of work in the IETF, so that's interesting. And I think.
And whose fault is that?
It's mine, I guess. It's mine entirely. And I think that's it for this episode as well. If people want to find out more of this, then check out the IETF, check out the W3C and all the other standards bodies. They have pretty good websites that explain how these processes work and how you can contribute. Maybe check out the dispatch from the IETF. There might be interesting things coming that you are looking to be part of. I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, thank you all, folks, for listening, and goodbye.
Bye-bye.
We've been having fun with these podcast episodes, and we hope that you, the listener, have found them both entertaining and insightful too. Feel free to drop us a note on LinkedIn or chat with us at one of the next events that we go to if you have any thoughts. And of course, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you and goodbye.